If you give me a plate of food, I'll make your son walk again. He doubted it until Michael Thompson was going through the most difficult moment of his life. After 2 years of trying every possible treatment, the doctors had been clear. His son Jacob, only 8 years old, would never walk again. That's when that girl showed up at the door of his home in Beverly Hills, Los Angeles. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, with worn-out clothes and unkempt hair, but her eyes shone with a determination that didn't match her age. "If you give me a plate of food, I'll make your son walk again," she said, pointing directly at Jacob, who was in the wheelchair next to his father. Michael almost laughed at the absurd situation. How could a hungry child promise something that the best neurologists in the country had said was impossible? "Little girl, who are you? How did you get here?" he asked, looking around to see if there was any adult nearby. "My name is Lily. I live down there in the Skid Row district," she answered without hesitation. "And I'm not lying about your son." Jacob, who had rarely shown interest in anything since the accident, leaned in his chair to get a better look at the girl. "Dad, let her in. At least she doesn't look at me with pity," said the boy, with a maturity that broke Michael's heart. "Lily, is it?" Michael sighed. "Look, I don't know what kind of game this is, but—" "It's not a game," she interrupted him. "My grandma worked for 40 years as a massage therapist in hospitals. She taught me things that doctors don't know." There was something in the way she spoke that made Michael hesitate. The absolute confidence in her voice, the way she didn't lower her eyes in front of him. A man who was used to intimidating people in business meetings. "All right," he finally said. "Come in. I'll fix something for you to eat." Lily followed father and son to the kitchen of the mansion, her eyes widening at the size of the house. Michael prepared a generous plate with rice, beans, steak, and salad. The girl devoured everything in a few minutes, as if she hadn't eaten in days. "Now I'll keep my part of the deal," she said, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "Wait a minute." Michael raised his hand. "You can't just—" "Dad, let her try," Jacob pleaded. "What do we have to lose?" Lily took out of her worn backpack some objects that made Michael question his sanity. Old elastic bands, pieces of polished wood, and a yellowed notebook with loose pages. "These are the tools my grandma used," she explained. "Every muscle has a special way of being awakened. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing." Michael watched skeptically as Lily placed her hands on Jacob's legs. She closed her eyes as if she were feeling something he couldn't see. "Here," she murmured, touching the boy's right knee. "The problem didn't start in the legs. It started here, in the spine." "How can you know that?" Michael asked, surprised. Indeed, the accident had been a fall that first hit Jacob's back. "My grandma always said that the body tells its own story to those who know how to listen," Lily answered, starting to make circular movements on the boy's legs. During the first session, nothing happened. Jacob felt nothing in his legs, and Michael began to feel guilty for having fed false hopes to his son. "It didn't work," Jacob said softly, clearly disappointed. "Not yet," corrected Lily. "My grandma always said that a muscle that's been asleep for 2 years doesn't wake up on the first day. It needs time." "Little girl, I think that—" Michael began. "I'll come back tomorrow." Lily interrupted him, putting her things back in her backpack. "Thank you for the food." She left the house with the same determination with which she had arrived, leaving father and son in silence. "Dad, do you think she could be right?" Jacob asked that night during dinner. "Son, I don't want you to get your hopes up," Michael replied carefully. "The doctors were very clear about your condition." "But what if they're wrong?" the boy insisted. "What if Lily knows something they don't?" Michael didn't know how to respond. As a father, he wanted to believe in any possibility of a cure for his son. As a rational and successful man, he knew miracles didn't exist. The next day, promptly at 3 in the afternoon, Lily appeared again at the gate. This time, Michael let her in without hesitation. "Today will be different," she announced. "Yesterday I was just getting to know Jacob's legs. Today I already know what to do." She repeated the movements from the previous day, but this time added simple exercises with the elastic bands. She tied them around Jacob's ankles and asked him to try to move his feet. I can't, Jacob said, frustrated. You don't need to be able to, Lily replied patiently. You just need to try. The muscle needs to remember it exists. For 2 hours, she worked on the boy's legs, telling stories about other children she had seen recover at the hospital where her grandmother worked. There was a boy there who couldn't walk for 6 months after surgery, she said, massaging Jacob's calf. The doctors said he would never run again. Today he plays soccer. Really? Jacob asked, his eyes shining. Really? My grandma always said the body wants to heal. Sometimes it just needs someone to remind it how. When Lily left that day, Jacob seemed more excited than Michael had seen him in months. During dinner, the boy told all the stories she had shared. Dad, do you think I could play soccer again? He asked. I don't know, son, Michael replied honestly, but I like seeing you hopeful again. The routine continued for the next few days. Lily appeared religiously at 3 in the afternoon, worked with Jacob for 2 hours, and left. Michael began to notice small changes in his son. He smiled more, complained less, and even started watching soccer games on television again. During the 5th session, something different happened. Dad, Jacob suddenly shouted. I felt something. Michael ran to where they were. Lily had just touched the big toe on Jacob's right foot, and the boy swore he had felt a strange sensation. It's probably just his imagination, Michael thought, but didn't say anything out loud. I knew it, Lily smiled. Your muscles are starting to wake up. Try again, Jacob asked eagerly. Lily repeated the movement, but this time nothing happened. The frustration on Jacob's face was evident. Why didn't it work again? He asked. Because it's still too early, Lily explained. It's like when you're almost waking up in the morning. Sometimes you wake up a little, then go back to sleep until you finally get up. That night, Michael had a serious conversation with his wife, Jennifer, who had returned from a business trip. Michael, have you lost your mind? She said, clearly irritated. A street child messing with our son. Jennifer, you weren't here to see how he was, Michael replied. Jacob was becoming depressed. Now he has hope again. Hope based on fantasies, Jennifer raised her voice. What will happen when this girl leaves and nothing has changed? What if something changes? Michael countered. What if she's right? You're talking like a desperate man, Jennifer sighed. I understand your pain, but we can't expose our son to quackery. She's 7 years old, Jennifer. What harm could she do? The harm of creating false hope, his wife replied coldly. Despite Jennifer's resistance, Michael Thompson decided to continue allowing Lily's visits. He had seen a spark in his son's eyes that he hadn't seen in 2 years, and he wasn't willing to give that up easily. The following week, Dr. Robert Anderson, the neurologist who was treating Jacob, came for a home visit. When he learned about the sessions with Lily, his reaction was immediate. Mr. Thompson, this is extremely irresponsible, he said, adjusting his glasses. You could be harming the boy's psychological recovery. But doctor, Michael argued, Jacob says he sometimes feels things in his legs. Phantom sensations are common in cases like this, Dr. Anderson explained. The brain sometimes creates the illusion of sensation. That doesn't mean recovery. What if it's not an illusion? Jacob asked from his wheelchair. The doctor bent down to be at the boy's eye level. Jacob, I know you really want to walk again. We all do. But sometimes our desire is so strong that our mind makes us believe in things that aren't real. But I really felt it, Jacob insisted. I know you believe that, Dr. Anderson said gently. But the tests show your spinal cord was severely damaged. Modern science doesn't know how to reverse that kind of injury. After the doctor left, the house fell silent. Jennifer looked at Michael with an expression that said, I told you so, while Jacob stared at his own legs with renewed sadness. Dad, do you think the doctor is right? Jacob asked that night. Michael didn't know how to respond. As a businessman, he had always trusted data and scientific evidence, but as a father, he wanted to believe in any possibility, no matter how small. Son, I don't know, he said honestly, but I know you've been happier since Lily started coming here. That's true, Jacob admitted. She makes me feel normal. How so? She doesn't look at me like I'm broken, Jacob explained. She talks to me like I'm really going to walk again. Michael felt his heart tighten. He hadn't realized how much people around Jacob treated him with excessive pity, including himself. When Lily arrived the next day, Michael took her aside for a private conversation before her session with Jacob. "Lily, I need to know something," he said. "Do you really believe you can help my son?" "I can't promise anything," she replied with seriousness beyond her years. "But my grandma always said the body has its own wisdom. Sometimes doctors know a lot about diseases, but forget to listen to what the body is trying to say." "And what is Jacob's body telling you?" Lily grew thoughtful for a moment. "It's saying it wants to try," she finally said. "His legs aren't completely dead. They're sleeping very deeply, but not dead." "How can you be sure?" "Because when I touch them, I feel like something is moving very far away, very deep down, like a fish at the bottom of a very dark lake." The poetic way she described it touched Michael in a way he hadn't expected. There was something about that girl's perception that transcended formal medical knowledge. "All right," he said. "Keep trying." During the next 2 weeks, the sessions continued. Lily brought new exercises, some so simple they seemed like child's play. She had Jacob imagine he was walking, describing each step in detail. "Now you're stepping on the soft grass in the garden," she would say, massaging his feet. "Feel how cool and damp it is. Now you're climbing a small hill. Your legs get a little heavier, but they keep moving." Michael watched these sessions with conflicting feelings. Rationally, he knew this had no scientific basis. Emotionally, he saw his son more alive than in the past 2 years. It was during the 15th session that something inexplicable happened. Lily was having Jacob visualize a run on the beach when, suddenly, the boy's left big toe moved. It wasn't a phantom sensation or imagination. It was a clear and visible movement. "Dad!" Jacob shouted so loudly that Jennifer came running from the kitchen. "My foot moved!" Michael almost couldn't believe what he saw. The movement had been subtle, but unmistakable. "Do it again," he asked, his voice trembling. Lily repeated the exercise, but nothing happened. "Why didn't it move again?" Jacob asked, anxious. "Because your muscle is still learning," Lily explained calmly. "It's like learning to play the piano. At first you can play a note every now and then you can play more notes until you can play a whole song." Jennifer, who had witnessed the movement, fell silent. She was a practical woman, an executive at a big company, used to dealing with concrete facts. What she had seen defied everything she believed. "That's impossible," she murmured. "Impossible is a word adults use when they don't understand something," Lily replied without malice. "Children don't know that word. That's why they can do things adults think are impossible." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. That night, Michael called Dr. Robert Anderson to report what had happened. The doctor's reaction was predictable. "Mr. Thompson, involuntary movements can occur even in cases of complete paralysis," he explained. "This does not indicate recovery of motor function." "But doctor, he controlled the movement," Michael insisted. "That is highly unlikely. I would like to examine Jacob tomorrow to assess the situation." When Dr. Anderson arrived the next day, Lily was doing her daily session with Jacob. The doctor watched with evident skepticism. "Can I ask the girl to stop for a moment?" he said. "I would like to perform some tests." Lily stepped away, and Dr. Anderson began his routine neurological exams. He tested reflexes, sensitivity, and motor function. As expected, the results were the same as always. "Jacob, can you try to move your foot for me?" the doctor asked. The boy concentrated intensely, but nothing happened. "As I suspected," Dr. Anderson murmured, making notes. "But doctor," Jacob protested, "yesterday I did it." "I understand you believe that," the doctor replied patiently, "but the exams show there is no neurological activity in the pathways that control your legs." Lily, who had observed everything in silence, approached. "Do you want to see him move his foot?" she asked the doctor. "Young lady, that's not possible," Dr. Anderson replied condescendingly. "Let me try," she said simply. Lily positioned herself beside Jacob and began the same movements from the day before. She talked about the beach, the warm sand, the wind on his face. Gradually, Jacob relaxed and entered the state of deep visualization that had become routine. "Now you're running on the sand," Lily whispered. "Your feet sink a little with each step. Feel how the muscles in your legs work to propel you forward." And then it happened again. Jacob's right big toe moved slightly. Dr. Anderson almost dropped his clipboard. His eyes widened, and he leaned down to examine the foot more closely. "That is," he began, but didn't finish the sentence. "Impossible?" Lily asked with a smile. "Do it again," the doctor asked, clearly shaken. Lily repeated the process, but as always, the movement didn't repeat immediately. "Doctor, how do you explain this?" Michael asked. Dr. Robert Anderson remained silent for a long time, observing Jacob and then Lily. I can't explain," he finally admitted. "By the medical parameters I know, this shouldn't be possible." "Then maybe the parameters are incomplete," Lily suggested. The doctor looked at the girl with renewed interest. "Where did you learn these techniques?" he asked. "From my grandma. She said she worked with many children whom doctors said would never get better, but some did improve. And she never documented these methods. She didn't know how to write well," Lily explained, "but she taught me everything she knew." Dr. Anderson spent the next hour asking detailed questions about the techniques Lily used. Although he couldn't understand the scientific mechanism behind them, he couldn't deny what he had seen with his own eyes. "Mr. Thompson," he said before leaving, "I'll research similar cases in medical literature. For now, I suggest you continue with the sessions, but with regular medical monitoring." After the doctor left, the house fell into a thoughtful silence. Jennifer, who had been the most skeptical, seemed deeply disturbed by what she had witnessed. "Lily," she said, "is your grandmother still alive?" "Yes," the girl replied, "but she's very sick. That's why I came alone to offer help." "Where do you live?" "In the Skid Row district down there. My grandma can't work anymore, so I go out looking for ways to get food." Michael and Jennifer exchanged a meaningful look. They had been so focused on the healing potential for Jacob that they hadn't thought about this girl's situation. "Lily," Michael said, "how about you bring your grandmother here? We'd like to meet her." "She's too weak to leave the house," Lily replied, "but if you want, I can take you there." The next day, Michael and Jennifer did something they had never done before. They went down to the Skid Row district. The difference between the two worlds, separated by just a few miles, was shocking. The house where Lily lived with her grandmother was a small shack made of wood and masonry, with 2 rooms and a bathroom shared with other families. But when they met Grandma Faith, Lily's grandmother, they understood where the girl's wisdom came from. Grandma Faith was a 68-year-old woman, thin from illness, but with eyes that shone with intelligence and kindness. Her hands, calloused from decades of work, moved with surprising grace when she demonstrated some of the techniques she had taught her granddaughter. "I worked 40 years at Cedars Medical Center," she told them, in a weak but firm voice. "I started as a cleaner, but doctors began to notice I had a special way with patients." "What kind of way?" Jennifer asked. "I could feel where their pain was, even when they couldn't explain," Grandma Faith answered. "Over time, some doctors started calling me to help with difficult cases. And did it work?" "Sometimes yes, sometimes no," she admitted honestly. "But I always believed the body has its own healing strength. Sometimes it just needs someone to remind it how to use that strength." Michael observed the simple shack where these 2 people lived. There was no luxury, but there was something his mansion didn't have, a feeling of peace and purpose. "Grandma Faith," he said, "we would like to help you. How about you come stay with us for a while?" The woman smiled but shook her head. "I appreciate the offer, but this is our place," she said. "But if you really want to help, there are other ways." "How?" "Lily told me there are other children in your neighborhood who could benefit from companionship," Grandma Faith explained. "Rich children get sad and lonely too. That's how an idea was born that would change the lives of everyone involved." At the end of that week, Lily brought 3 other children from the Skid Row district to meet Jacob. They were Tyler, 9 years old, who had recently lost his father, Emily, 6 years old, who was extremely shy, and Ethan, 10 years old, who took care of his sick mother. Jacob's first reaction was surprise. For 2 years he hadn't spent time with other children, except in formal medical situations. But he soon discovered that those children didn't see him as the boy in the wheelchair. To them, he was simply Jacob. "Do you play video games?" Tyler asked, without any reference to the wheelchair. "Yes, I do," Jacob replied, excited. "That's so cool. I've never played video games," Tyler admitted. "Can you teach me?" It was the beginning of a friendship that transcended social barriers. During Lily's sessions, the other children would play in the garden, creating an atmosphere of joy and normality that Jacob hadn't experienced in years. Gradually, the movements in Jacob's legs became more frequent, first his toes, then subtle movements in his ankles. Dr. Robert Anderson followed the progress with scientific fascination and medical perplexity. "It's as if the neural pathways are being rebuilt," he murmured during an examination. "But this contradicts everything we know about spinal cord injuries." "Maybe we don't know everything," Michael suggested. "Maybe not," the doctor agreed humbly. Jennifer, who had initially resisted the presence of poor children in her home, began to get actively involved. She organized tutoring sessions for them, bought clothes and school supplies, and discovered that taking care of those children filled a void in her life that she didn't even know existed. "Why are you doing this?" Emily asked one day, while Jennifer was helping her with her homework. "Because you all remind me of important things I had forgotten," Jennifer replied. "What things?" "That being happy has nothing to do with having expensive things," she explained. "It has to do with having people who care about you." Meanwhile, Lily's sessions with Jacob continued to evolve. She introduced more complex exercises, always based on what she had learned from Grandma Faith. Some days the progress was evident, other days it seemed to regress. But the overall trend was constant improvement. It was during a particularly intense session that the most significant milestone so far occurred. Lily was working with an especially vivid visualization technique when Jacob, deeply focused, managed to slightly bend his right knee. The movement was small, perhaps 2 centimeters, but it was voluntary and controlled. Everyone in the room fell silent, hardly believing what they had seen. "I did it," Jacob whispered, with tears in his eyes. "I really moved my leg." Lily smiled but showed no surprise. "I knew you could do it," she said simply. "Your legs were just waiting for you to believe they could move again." Dr. Robert Anderson, who had been called to witness the event, watched for a long time before speaking. "Jacob," he said finally, "could you try to do that again?" The boy concentrated intensely, and after a few minutes of effort he managed to repeat the movement. It was clear he had conscious control over the action. "This changes everything," Dr. Robert Anderson murmured. "I'll need to review the entire diagnosis." But not everything was good news. Grandma Faith was getting weaker and weaker, and Lily began to miss some sessions to take care of her grandmother. When Michael and Jennifer learned of the situation, they immediately offered private medical care. "Grandma Faith needs specialized treatment," Dr. Robert Anderson explained after examining her. "She has severe pneumonia that needs to be treated immediately." "We will do whatever is necessary," Michael said without hesitation. Grandma Faith was admitted to the best private hospital in Los Angeles. During her recovery, Lily stayed at Michael and Jennifer's house, sharing the guest room that had been adapted for her. Lily's constant presence accelerated Jacob's progress. With longer and more intensive daily sessions, he began to regain strength and coordination in a surprising way. Within weeks, he could consciously move both legs, though he still couldn't stand. "The next step is working on balance," Lily explained. "Your muscles are remembering how to move, but now they need to remember how to work together." It was during this phase that an unexpected complication arose. Jacob's progress had caught the attention of the medical media, and soon specialists from across the country wanted to study the case. Some were genuinely interested in learning, others were skeptics who wanted to debunk what they considered quackery. Dr. William Parker, a famous neurologist from Boston, came to Los Angeles with a team of doctors to evaluate Jacob. His approach was immediately confrontational. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "you are exposing your son to unproven methods that could be harmful to his psychological development." "Doctor, you've seen the results," Michael replied. "My son is moving again." "Reflex movements can be artificially stimulated," Dr. Parker argued. "That doesn't mean real neurological recovery." "Then explain how he can consciously control these movements," Michael challenged. "There are suggestion techniques that can create the illusion of control," the doctor answered. "It's a well-documented phenomenon in cases of collective hysteria." The accusation that the family was experiencing collective hysteria infuriated Jennifer. "Doctor, my son is not imagining things," she said firmly. "He is actually moving." "Ma'am, I understand that as a mother you want to believe in any possibility," Dr. Parker replied condescendingly. "But medical science has strict protocols for good reasons." It was then that Lily, who had observed the entire discussion in silence, approached. "Do you want to see Jacob walk?" she asked simply. "Young lady, that's impossible," Dr. Parker answered impatiently. "Impossible is a word doctors use when they don't know how to explain something," Lily repeated her favorite phrase. "Listen, child." The doctor bent down to speak to her. "I studied medicine for 10 years and have worked in neurology for 15. I know what I'm talking about." "I also know what I'm talking about," Lily replied calmly. "I learned from my grandma, who worked with children like Jacob for 40 years. "Your grandmother had no medical training," Dr. Parker argued. "No," Lily agreed. "But she had something you might not have." "What would that be?" "Faith," Lily answered simply. The response irritated the doctor even more, but before he could retort, Jacob intervened. "Doctor," the boy said, "can I show you what I can do?" Dr. Parker sighed, clearly considering it a waste of time, but agreed. Jacob positioned himself in the wheelchair, and Lily began her usual visualization routine. But this time, she went beyond the normal exercises. "Today you're going to do something special," she told the boy. "Today, you're going to remind your legs what it's like to stand." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. With gentle and deliberate movements, Lily helped Jacob out of the wheelchair and stand, supported by the parallel bars that had been installed in the room. The doctors watched skeptically, assuming Lily was simply supporting the boy's weight. But then, gradually, Lily began withdrawing her support, and Jacob remained standing. The silence in the room was absolute. Dr. Parker and his team watched in disbelief as Jacob stayed upright, trembling slightly from the effort, but unmistakably supporting his own weight. "That's impossible," Dr. Parker murmured. "You've said that word again," Lily observed. Jacob managed to stand for almost a full minute before beginning to sway. Lily helped him sit back down in the chair, and he was breathless but beaming. "Doctor," he said, "do you still think I'm imagining things?" Dr. Parker didn't respond immediately. He approached and performed a series of quick neurological tests, checking reflexes and motor responses. The results were unmistakable. There was real neurological activity in Jacob's legs. I need to reconsider all my assumptions," he finally admitted. "What you're doing challenges everything I've learned about spinal cord injuries." "Maybe the problem isn't what we're doing," Lily suggested. "Maybe the problem is what doctors aren't doing." "What do you mean by that?" "You look at what's broken and say it can't be fixed," she explained. "We look at what still works and help it grow." The wisdom contained in those simple words struck Dr. Parker like lightning. Throughout his entire career, he had been trained to focus on limitations and impossibilities. He had never seriously considered working with remaining potential. "Could you teach me these techniques?" he asked humbly. "I can try," Lily responded. "But first you need to stop using the word impossible." In the days that followed, Dr. Parker stayed in Los Angeles, studying Lily's methods. He documented every technique, every exercise, every theory she had learned from Grandma Faith. Gradually, he began developing a scientific understanding of what was happening. "It's as if you're creating new neural pathways," he explained to Michael and Jennifer. "Instead of trying to repair existing damage, you're teaching the brain to find new ways to communicate with the legs." "That's exactly right," Lily confirmed. "My grandma always said the brain is like a big city. If one street is blocked, you find another way to get where you want to go." The simple but perfect analogy made Dr. Parker understand there was much to learn beyond medical textbooks. He began working with Lily to develop protocols that combined her intuitive methods with rigorous scientific monitoring. Meanwhile, Grandma Faith was recovering at the hospital. When she learned of Jacob's progress, her tears of joy moved the entire medical team. "I always knew Lily had the gift," she told Michael when he visited her. "Since she was little, she could make hurt animals feel better just by touching them. And now she's making my son better," Michael responded, with evident gratitude in his voice. "She's doing much more than that," Grandma Faith observed. "She's making your family closer, isn't she?" Michael paused to think. It was true. Since Lily had entered their lives, he and Jennifer had reconnected in a way that hadn't happened in years. Their shared adversity and renewed hope had brought them together again. "How did you know?" he asked. "Because healing isn't just about making the body work right," Grandma Faith explained. "It's about making the soul work right too." Back at home, the physical therapy sessions with Lily continued to progress. Jacob could now stand for longer periods and had begun taking small steps with support. Every achievement was celebrated by the entire extended family that had formed around him. Tyler, Emily, and Ethan had become regular visitors at the house, and their unique personalities had enriched everyone's lives. Tyler revealed a talent for mathematics and began helping Jacob with his studies. Emily, though still shy, had become a prolific artist, filling the house with colorful drawings. Ethan demonstrated impressive organizational skills and began coordinating the group's games. Jennifer, who had initially resisted the children's presence, now couldn't imagine life without them. She had reduced her workload to spend more time at home, discovering a satisfaction in caring for others that her corporate career had never provided. "You've changed," Michael observed one evening as they watched the children play in the garden. "For the better, I hope," Jennifer replied. "Definitely for the better," he confirmed. "You seem more yourself." "It's funny," Jennifer reflected. "I spent years chasing professional success, thinking it would make me happy, but I discovered happiness was right here, waiting for me to stop chasing other things." As they talked, they watched Lily working with Jacob on a new exercise. She had developed a technique where he tried to take steps while visualizing different scenarios, walking on the beach, climbing a mountain, running in a field. "One step onto the soft sand," Lily said, guiding him along the parallel bars. "Now another step, feeling the sea breeze on your face." And Jacob responded, not just with physical movement, but with an expression of peace and determination that radiated to everyone around. It was during one of these sessions that the moment everyone had been waiting for happened, though no one had dared predict when it would come. Jacob was practicing steps with support when suddenly he let go of one of the bars. Instead of falling, he took 3 completely independent steps before needing to support himself again. Silence was followed by an explosion of joy. Michael and Jennifer ran to hug their son. The other children shouted with excitement, and Lily simply smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had always known that moment would arrive. "I walked," Jacob exclaimed, with tears of joy streaming down his face. "I really walked by myself." "Yes, you walked," Lily confirmed, "and tomorrow you'll walk a little more." In the weeks that followed, the progress was spectacular. Jacob went from 3 steps to 10, then to crossing the entire room, and finally to walking freely through the house. There were still limitations. He tired quickly and sometimes needed the wheelchair for long distances, but he had regained a function that doctors had said was impossible. Dr. Robert Anderson documented each phase of the recovery, collaborating with Dr. Parker to create a treatment protocol that could be replicated for other patients. They were revolutionizing the field of neurology, and it had all started with a hungry girl who asked for a plate of food in exchange for hope. Jacob and Lily's story began to spread beyond medical circles. Families with children in similar situations sought out the Thompson family for help. In response, Michael and Jennifer made a decision that would permanently change their lives. They transformed part of their mansion into a non-profit rehabilitation center where Lily's techniques could be taught to other therapists and applied to other children. Grandma Faith, fully recovered, became the technical coordinator, passing decades of empirical knowledge to a new generation of professionals. "I never imagined this would grow so much," Michael admitted to Lily during the center's official opening. "My grandma always said small seeds can become big trees," Lily replied. "You only planted a seed when you gave me that plate of food." The center soon began serving dozens of children, and the results, though not always as dramatic as Jacob's, were consistently positive. Most importantly, it created a community where families facing similar challenges could support each other. Tyler, Emily, and Ethan became official assistants at the center, helping other children adapt and creating an environment of joy and normalcy. Their own lives had been transformed. Tyler received a scholarship to a private school, Emily began exhibiting her artworks in local galleries, and Ethan was accepted into a youth leadership program. Jennifer completely left her corporate career to dedicate herself to the center. She discovered that managing an organization focused on helping others was infinitely more rewarding than maximizing profits for shareholders. "Do you miss your old life, Miss?" Lily asked one day. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity," Jennifer admitted, "but I never miss the superficiality. Now I know my purpose." 2 years after that first meeting at the gate, Jacob not only walked normally, but had returned to playing sports. He would never be a professional athlete. Some limitations remained, but he could run, swim, and even play soccer with friends. Most importantly, however, was the person he had become. The experience of depending on others and then fighting for his own recovery had given him an empathy and maturity rare for his age. He became a natural mentor for other children arriving at the center, offering not just hope, but a concrete example that recovery was possible. Lily, now 9 years old, had become a minor celebrity in the medical world. Universities invited her to give lectures, and doctors came from other countries to learn her techniques. But she remained the same wise and determined girl who had appeared at the Thompsons' door 2 years earlier. "You haven't changed a bit," Jacob observed during one of their regular maintenance sessions. "Why would I change?" Lily asked. "I always knew you were going to get better." "How did you know?" "Because you really wanted to get better," she explained. "Many people say they want to, but they don't really mean it. They're afraid of the hard work it will take." "And if I hadn't made it?" Jacob asked. "Then we would have tried other things," Lily replied simply. "My grandma always said that giving up is the only thing that doesn't work." The wisdom contained in those words perfectly summarized the philosophy that had transformed so many lives. The refusal to accept imposed limitations, the faith in latent possibilities, and the determination to keep trying, even in the face of skepticism. The official opening of the center took place at a ceremony that brought together doctors, beneficiary families, and local authorities. But the most emotional moment was when Grandma Faith, now 70 years old but still vibrant, cut the inaugural ribbon alongside her granddaughter. 40 years ago, when I started working at the hospital," she said in her speech, "I never imagined my simple methods could turn into something so big. But I learned that it doesn't matter the size of the seed. What matters is the quality of the soil where it's planted." The soil, she mentioned, was evident to everyone. It was the love, the dedication, and the refusal to accept that some situations have no solution. During the party that followed, Michael observed his extended family interacting in the garden. Jacob was running with the other children. Jennifer was coordinating activities with the naturalness of someone who had found her calling, and Lily was chatting animatedly with doctors who had come to learn from her. "Dad," Jacob approached, breathless from running. "Do you remember when I asked if Lily was right about making me walk?" "I remember," Michael replied. "Do you think she was right from the beginning? Or was it our faith in her that made it work?" The question was too deep for a simple answer. "Son," Michael finally said, "I think she believed when we couldn't believe, and her belief gave us strength to believe too. In the end, we all made it work." "So it was teamwork." "It was family work," Michael corrected, "a family that grew far beyond what we thought possible." As they talked, Lily approached carrying an envelope. "What's that?" Jacob asked. "A letter from a family in Miami," she explained. "They have a 6-year-old boy who stopped walking after meningitis. They want to know if we can help. And can we? Jacob asked. Of course we can, Lily replied with her characteristic confidence. Dr. Parker is already organizing a trip there next month. Can I go along? Jacob asked. Why do you want to go? Michael asked. Because I know what it's like not to believe you'll walk again, Jacob explained. And maybe if he sees me walking, it'll be easier for him to believe it's possible. His son's maturity and compassion moved Michael deeply. The boy who had been devastated by his own limitation now wanted to use his recovery to help others. Of course you can go, Michael said. We can all go. And so, what had started as a family crisis turned into a life mission. The Thompson family, along with Lily and Grandma Faith, began traveling across the country bringing hope and innovative methods to families facing similar challenges. Every city visited, every child helped, every family transformed was confirmation that their first meeting at the gate hadn't been coincidence. It had been the beginning of something much bigger than any of them could have imagined. During one of these trips, while watching Lily working with a girl in New Orleans, Jennifer made an observation that perfectly summarized their entire journey. You know something, she told Michael. When Lily showed up at our door asking for food in exchange for making Jacob walk, I thought she was offering to perform a miracle for us. And wasn't she? She was, Jennifer smiled. But the miracle wasn't just Jacob walking again. It was discovering we could all become better people than we were. Michael nodded silently. Jacob's physical recovery had been extraordinary, but the personal transformations of each family member had been equally miraculous. They had discovered purpose, compassion, and a form of happiness they hadn't known existed. 3 years after that first meeting, the Rehabilitation Center had become a national reference. Lily was recognized as a pioneer in pediatric neurorehabilitation techniques, and the Thompson family had found a way of living that transcended any material success they had experienced before. Jacob, now 11 years old, walked normally and had become a natural young leader, inspiring other children with his story of overcoming. He regularly spoke at medical conferences, not about scientific techniques, but about the importance of never giving up hope. During one such presentation, a doctor asked what had been the decisive moment in his recovery. It wasn't a moment, Jacob answered with the wisdom of someone who had lived the experience. It was the decision to believe it was possible, even when it seemed impossible. And that only happened because I found people who believed before I did. The answer drew prolonged applause, but Jacob knew the real heroine of the story was in the audience, watching with the quiet smile of someone who always knew that day would come. After the lecture, Lily approached him. You spoke very well, she said. I learned from the best teacher, Jacob replied. I didn't teach you how to speak, Lily laughed. No, Jacob agreed, but you taught me to believe. And that was more important than anything else. As they left the auditorium together, Jacob reflected on how a simple offer, a plate of food in exchange for hope, had changed so many lives. Not just his, but his entire family's, Lily's and Grandma Faith's, and hundreds of other children and families who had been touched by that chain of kindness and determination. Lily, he said, do you think my life would be different if you hadn't shown up that day? Of course it would, she answered without hesitation. How? It would have been easier, Lily said with a mischievous smile, but it wouldn't have been as interesting. And she was right. The journey had been difficult, full of moments of doubt, frustration, and fear, but it had also been filled with discoveries, growth, and the deep satisfaction that comes from overcoming what seemed impossible. As they grew, both Jacob and Lily knew their lives would forever be intertwined by that first meeting. They had become more than patient and therapist, more than friends. They had become living symbols that the right combination of faith, determination, and love can overcome any obstacle. The legacy they created would continue to impact lives far beyond their own experiences. The Rehabilitation Center would train new therapists, help thousands of children, and repeatedly prove that methods based on compassion and hope could be as effective as traditional medical protocols. But at the end of the day, when all the lectures were over, All the patients had gone home and all the successes had been celebrated, the story would always return to its starting point. A brave girl who had enough faith to ask for the impossible, and a family who had enough courage to believe. The simple offer, "If you give me a plate of food, I'll make your son walk again," had turned into something much bigger than anyone could have imagined. It had become a legacy of hope that would continue to inspire people for generations, and it all began with one 7-year-old girl's refusal to accept that some things are impossible. End of story. What did you think of this story of overcoming and hope? Leave in the comments which moment moved you the most, and if you know any similar stories of determination that transformed lives. Your opinion is very important to us. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories like this one.